So I'm going to skip the introductions so we have more time for questions. We have very limited time, but we'll try to take as many as possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to Liz.
It's great to be with you today. Thank you, Jen. I have an update for you on the Colonial Pipeline and what the Biden administration is doing to provide assistance through a whole-of-government effort. On Friday evening, May 7th, Colonial Pipeline reported that its pipeline system had been subject to a ransomware cyber attack. Colonial chose to shut down its pipeline operations as a precautionary measure and to ensure that the ransomware could not migrate from business computer systems to those that control and operate the pipeline. We've been in ongoing contact with Colonial, and the President continues to be regularly briefed on the incident and our work. Colonial is currently working with its private cybersecurity consultants to assess potential damage and to determine when it is safe to bring the pipeline back online. Thus far, Colonial has told us that it has not suffered damage and can be brought back online relatively quickly, but that safety is a priority, given that it has never before taken the entire pipeline down. Beginning on Friday night, soon after we learned of the shutdown, the White House convened an interagency team that included the Department of Energy, which is the lead agency for incident response in this case, the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, the FBI, the Department of Transportation, Pipeline Safety and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, the Department of the Treasury, the Department of Defense, and other agencies. To give you a sense of what we've been doing together since that first meeting, we have met throughout the weekend. The Department of Energy's Energy Information Agency, or EIA, is in contact with state and local agencies to assess current supply and impacts due to the shutdown. DOE has also convened the oil and natural gas and electric sector utility partners to share details about the ransomware attack and discuss recommended measures to mitigate further incidents across the industry. DHS's CISA is preparing a release to go to the broader critical infrastructure community to ensure it has visibility into the ransomware attack, and it's taking appropriate measures to protect its networks. Colonial is responsible for safely returning the pipeline to service, and our role in the federal government is to take proactive steps to analyze the impacts of the shutdown on the delivery of gasoline, diesel, and aviation fuel in states that are dependent on the pipeline, and to identify federal options for alleviating supply shortfalls should they develop. For example, to help address potential supply disruptions, the Department of Transportation issued an hours of service waiver yesterday, which provides greater flexibility to drivers transporting gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and other refined petroleum products across 17 states, as well as the District of Columbia. Right now, there is not a supply shortage. We are preparing for multiple possible contingencies because that's our job, especially on the Homeland Security team, and considering what additional steps may be useful to mitigate any potential disruptions to supply. This weekend's events put the spotlight on the fact that our nation's critical infrastructure is largely owned and operated by private sector companies. When those companies are attacked, they serve as the first line of defense, and we depend on the effectiveness of their defenses. To improve the cybersecurity of our critical infrastructure, the Biden administration has already launched a high-priority initiative to collaborate with our private sector partners to harden our defenses and to build our nation's resilience. And that is a perfect segue to my colleague Ann Neuberger, our Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technologies. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. So building on Liz's comments, as you know, on Friday, Colonial shut proactively its pipeline operations as a precautionary measure to ensure ransomware would not spread to its sensitive operational networks. In response, we're taking a multi-pronged and whole-of-government response to this incident and to ransomware overall. First, we're actively engaged with the company and offered support as needed to restore their systems.
She seems
Right
very
now, they've
confident in
not
what she's
asked for
talking
cyber
about.
support for the federal government, but we remain available to meet their cybersecurity needs.
Is she AI?
Second, we're aggressively investigating the incident and its culprits. As part of their
people
work
are
today,
doing all this
FBI
things.
released a flash alert with
A
indicators
flash
of
alert.
compromise and mitigation
Does she have a
measures
personality?
once infected. The FBI identified the ransomware as the dark side variant, which they've been investigating since October of last year.
The
It's a
FBI.
ransomware as a service
that's an
variant,
organization we
where
trust.
criminal affiliates conduct attacks and then share the proceeds with the ransomware developers. We recommend all critical infrastructure owners and operators use the indicators
This
that
is just
came
a
out in the
little,
FBI flash
thing I need to say.
protect
If you
themselves.
find a flash drive
And if
or
other
USB drive
if
on the
other
ground,
entities are
don't put it in
infected,
your computer.
please notify
Thanks.
the FBI. Third, the government is convening stakeholders more broadly to ensure everybody has the information needed to protect themselves and to rapidly share information. This morning, the Department of Energy convened calls with the electricity and oil and gas sectors to keep them informed. The Departments of Energy, Transportation, and DHS, and others will be sharing further indicators of compromise with the Sector Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, or ISACs. And the Department of Energy will be holding additional
13-year-old
calls with
boy in
critical
me went,
infrastructure
"I what?"
sector owners, as well as state and local leaders, to ensure
Sucks for
everyone
PC.
has the latest information about how to protect themselves. Fourth, we're taking the threats posed by ransomware seriously with several initiatives. First, we'll focus on industrial control systems. Critical infrastructure, as Liz noted, in the United States is largely owned and operated by the private sector, which determines their cybersecurity protections are applied to their systems. Under that context, in mid-April, the administration launched a new public-private initiative to enhance the security of critical infrastructure systems and improve visibility across their operational control systems, the systems on which all Americans depend. The Department of Energy had the lead for the first 100-day
I'm a
sprint
little behind in
focused on the
this. I might
utility
fast
sector,
forward a little
and we
bit.
will follow with follow-on sprints with
little
natural gas
political.
pipelines, water, and other sectors. The administration encourages all private sector owners of critical infrastructure
Okay, I'm gonna go
approach to ransomware actors and to ransoms overall. Liz?
just like 2 minutes behind.
So on the issue of gas prices, as I indicated right now, there are
Finally,
no
some
supply
real information.
disruptions, and the Department of Energy's
That's a huge
Information
that's a
Agency,
huge
the
thing.
EIA, is doing the analysis right now about potential supply disruptions and what price effects that could have.
There's gonna
And
be a
we're working with
disruption.
other
They're just
agencies to
trying to
consider how,
minimize
if necessary, we
the
can move
effect.
supplies
There's no
to
way.
a place where it might
There's
be
no way you
needed
can
if it
shut down
turns
a
out that
pipeline for
there is
multiple
a
days
shortfall.
and not have a disruption.
Thank you, Jen.
Doesn't make any
my
logical
question
sense.
is just to follow up on what Honor
Come
was
back to the stand,
asking.
girl.
Has the White House broadly considered advice for companies who are victimized by
Yeah.
you
They are
know, in
critical
such
interests,
incidents
but they
going
are
forward?
acting like it's a hot
Is
dog
there any
stand,
advice that you're
exactly.
considering when it comes to paying ransom in the future?
So that's a really good question. The first and most important advice
Oh my God, is this woman
secure
real?
your systems. In this case, the ransomware that was used is a
security.
known variant. The
Okay.
FBI has investigated
Security
many cases
is
of this in the
being
past,
secure
as I noted
with who
beginning
you
in
are and
October.
who I am.
So the first and most important thing is to ensure that systems are patched and that cybersecurity is maintained at the level
Hi,
needed in
I'm
a
an
given
AI
network.
girl.
We
I'm
want
not
to
even
see
real.
ransomware
I
not be
don't
successful,
speak
and
like a
that
normal
begins
human
with greater
being.
resilience, particularly in critical infrastructure networks.
And another question, you
and
mentioned
are you real?
perpetrators are usually transnational criminals. Do you have any information on whether this
That's
particular
racism.
incident has any ties to Russia or other Eastern European criminals?
At this time, we assess that DarkSide is a criminal actor, but that's certainly something that our intelligence community is looking into.
Yeah, can I ask a little bit more about DarkSide? What do we know?
No, you're from Fox
Is there
News.
any retaliatory measures that have been taken or are being considered by the U.S. In response to this or the pending investigation that you mentioned that dates back to October?
Absolutely. So I mentioned that DarkSide is a ransomware as a service variant. It's a new and very troubling variant where it's essentially provided as a service and the proceeds are split. So in that way, it's something that we're particularly troubled by. And I mentioned as well that the FBI has recently worked with international partners to take down and disrupt ransomware infrastructure. We expect that that will be a continued focus area
That's funny.
to make it far more difficult for these actors to prey on their victims.
I'm gonna
Even
be
though you're
making sure
treating
we
it
have
as a
pizza
criminal
for
hack,
lunches
are
every
you
day.
saying it's state sanctioned, or is there suspicion that it's state sanctioned, or do we just don't know right now?
As I mentioned a moment ago, currently we assess DarkSide as a criminal actor, but of course, our intelligence community is looking for any ties to any nation-state actors, and if we find that further information, we'll look into it
Is
further.
that our mask
In a
in
particular
her
country right now for
No, we're
police
not.
runs?
David.
Thanks very much. for
Jen
doing
just
this.
cut her off.
First,
No,
Anne,
we are
just to
not.
clarify on what you said on ransomware, the FBI has for years advised people not to pay it. I didn't quite hear you say that, so I wondered whether or not you're reconsidering the advice the FBI has given across many administrations.
Of course we're gonna
And
pay.
both you
Press
and
one
Liz
button.
both mentioned
Paid.
the concern that the ransomware
Let's
may
print more
have
money.
revealed some kind of data that would then move over to the operational side, or put malware in that could move to the operational side. We don't have a lot of understanding about what that concern is. Did you see in the early parts of the investigation that there was malware in the IT side that could be moved to operational? Was it simply that they froze up their ability to bill and, move the fuel, which has been one theory? Or that they
I can't
simply
say I'm on
learned
reporters.
information that would allow
Try
the
to, like, teach you
ransomware
something when they're
operators
talking.
to
It's like, just ask me a
later
freaking
on be
question.
able to get access
that
to
so
the
hard?
main operational side?
Thank you, David. So I'll begin and then, of course, turn it over to Liz if she'd like to add anything. So first, thank you for highlighting the FBI has provided advice in the past that paying a ransom would encourage further ransomware activity and is so troubling. We recognize, though, that companies are often in a difficult position if their data is encrypted and they do not have backups and cannot recover the data. And that is why, given the rise in
Right.
ransomware and given, frankly, the troubling trend we see of often targeting companies who have insurance and may be richer targets, that we need to look thoughtfully at this area, including with our international partners, to determine what we do in addition to actively disrupting infrastructure and holding perpetrators accountable to ensure that we're not encouraging the rise of ransomware. And to your second
I
point
got some
regarding the
ransomware right here.
concerns
Snow.
on the connection between the information technology and the operational technology side of a network. The operational technology side of the network is the
Dark side
part
is a part
that
of
actually
this.
drives control of a pipeline, for example, and as such, it is the more sensitive part. We are aware that it is the more significant part. Colonial was very careful, and one of the reasons they proactively chose to shut down the pipeline was because of concerns to manage the incident and gate the ransomware as quickly as they could.
Yes, that's
So
what
I
they want
s-
you to.
Did you
to
see
think.
evidence in the malware that was something that could move to the operational side?
So the Colonial incident is the
You would
private
think
sector
so.
entity themselves. That being said, speaking to the ransomware directly, the ransomware could, of course, infect technology, whether it is on the IT side or, for example, when there's Windows-like technology on the OT side. In this case, I won't speak to details here because it's subject to an investigation, and those details are held within that investigation. But it certainly is a concern we have in the case of ransomware, and why quickly and effectively gating the spread of the ransomware is always the first area of priority.
We can do Kelly until they gotta be quick though, because we have short timeline. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us if you believe that this, since it's criminal in your judgment now, that there's a financial motive there, but do you believe that there was a desire to try to penetrate a kind of system that has such huge implications for the U.S. economy and so forth? And how does that create concern for other kinds of systems, the electric grid, whatever it might be, other energy companies? Or was Colonial just a rich target because they could financially pay potentially? Do you see this as being about the infrastructure more than just the financial incentive?
We don't have further information about the intent of the perpetrators when conducting the ransomware hack against Colonial. However, as you know, ransomware affects broad sectors, and clearly criminals have learned that those sectors, one of the key sectors we saw during the COVID pandemic was the hospital sector that was affected by ransomware. Clearly, we see that criminal actors have focused on the more vulnerable victims, state and local governments, schools, critical infrastructure. And that is why
Yeah, because they're not very
coming
good
up
at
and
this stuff.
addressing
Duh.
ransomware with great vigor is a key priority of the administration, because we're very concerned about the growth in ransomware and the impact it has.
It'd be so easy
both on
to
small and medium
give a
businesses,
virus
as well as in
to
state and local governments in the United
ransomware
States
to a school.
and around the world.
I worked in
Two quick
education.
ones. Do you guys
Those
consider
people don't know.
this attack
what
ongoing,
emails to
or has
open,
the
what
malicious
emails
actor been
not to
removed? And just to follow up on something you said, that they have not, Colonial has not yet asked for cyber support. Does that create a problem in terms of your ability to respond, or the just federal government's ability writ large to get a grasp or handle on what's
The
happening?
dynamic is well beyond criminal.
The
if they're
details
acting
regarding
as if it is
the actual
isolated.
incident
Yeah, right,
are
exactly.
being currently investigated by the FBI. Colonial has noted in their public statement that they've worked to control the spread of the ransomware and are actively working to bring back up their network, and they're at the remediation phase. So we are happy to see the important progress that they made there. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
You said that the company has not yet asked for cyber support. Does that create a problem for the U.S. government's ability to respond or get a handle on what's exactly happening when a private entity is not requesting support in that capacity?
Our goal is ensuring that the support is available so that any private sector entity who is experiencing
Maybe
a
they feel
cyber
like another
hack
private
can
sector
turn
could
to
do
the
a better
government
job than the
for
government.
remediation assistance and technical assistance. We judge that the company said that they have adequate support, and they noted in their public remarks that they're using a third-party service, that they
See?
feel they're making adequate progress with their own resources. And we know we're standing by, but that is, we're happy that they are confident in their
I think I would
ability
rather
to
go after- use a
remediate the
third-party
incident and
source,
rapidly
too.
recover to meet the needs of their customers in this current environment.
Thank you both so much. I'm sorry they have to run to another meeting as they go around the world.
Thank you.
both for coming.
Jen, quit your job and
Okay,
become a comedian.
I know we also have a hard stop because of the president's remarks, just keeping you busy on a Monday. Just a couple of other small things at the top. Tomorrow, President Biden will meet with a bipartisan group of governors to discuss innovative ways governors are working to get the people in their states vaccinated. The bipartisan group will share with the president some best practices on promoting access to vaccination, building confidence in vaccines, and ensuring that everyone is reached in the vaccination response. He will also acknowledge the instrumental role Democrats, Republicans, and independents have played in the vaccination efforts thus far, including helping deliver 220 million shots in the first 100 days of his presidency. And he will also discuss how this continued partnership with governors is critical to meeting the goal of achieving 70% of our adult Americans having one shot and 160 million Americans fully vaccinated by July 4th. The meeting will include Governor Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, Utah Governor Spencer Cox,
I feel like the only reason
Ohio
that
Governor
number's
Mike
going up is 'cause
DeWine,
they're
New Mexico
adding
Governor
children to
Lujan
it.
Grisham, Maine Governor Janet Mills, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Amr.
Thanks.
Finally.
Is there any reaction to the intensifying clashes in Israel? In the last couple hours, it's just gotten worse. I know Jake Sullivan was on the phone over the weekend with his counterpart. But is the president at this point getting involved? What's the next step forward?
Israel told
and then
Biden
if I could just,
not
I know
be
we're
involved.
tight on
What the
time.
answer is.
Second question: any readout on the president's remarks in the Bucharest 9?
Sure. Let me start with the first, and I'll go to the second. We are continuing to closely monitor the violence in Israel. We have serious concerns about the situation, including violent confrontations that we've seen over the last few days, as you noted, an escalation earlier today.
Who are we to talk
you
about
also noted,
violence and
Amr, that
rioting?
in a call over the weekend
You guys
with
support
his
it.
Israeli counterpart, our National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan reiterated concerns about the potential evictions of Palestinian families
We'll show
from their
you
homes,
how to
and
get
they
these
agreed
people out
that
of
the
prison
launching of
faster
rocket
in
attacks
jail
and
and get
incendiary
DAs to get 'em
balloons
off.
from Gaza towards Israel is unacceptable and must be condemned. So this is something that our national security team is closely monitoring, obviously across government. Certainly the president is kept abreast and is watching closely as well. And on
Excuse
your
me?
second question, this meeting, if we haven't put out a readout yet, we will shortly. Let me give you just a couple of highlights here that I think I have available. One moment.
Take your time. Find it.
Let's see here. Let me work to get that to you shortly after if I don't have it
Haley
available
McNanny
here.
would be ready.
Here we go. So as Amr noted, the president spoke today with
She's
NATO's
already ready to
Eastern
quit.
Flank allies in a virtual summit hosted by the presidents of Romania and Poland. He underscored his commitment to rebuilding alliances and strengthening transatlantic relationships. He conveyed his desire for closer cooperation with our 9 allies in Central Europe and the Baltic and Black Sea regions on a full range of issues, including global health security, climate change, energy security, and global economic recovery. And he also expressed his support for enhancing NATO's deterrence and defense posture, as well as the importance of allies increasing their resilience against harmful economic and political actions by our strategic competitors. In addition, he welcomed the opportunity to engage with these allies, as well as the NATO Secretary General, about alliance efforts to meet future threats, which will be discussed at the NATO summit in June. And finally, he stressed the importance of strengthening democratic governance and rule of law at home, within the alliance, and around the world. Indita, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Just a quick follow-up on the Bucharest 9. Was the president's decision to participate in the meeting just sort of, was it driven by this desire to show a united front against Russia?
It was a desire to have a conversation and have a discussion with some important partners in Central Europe, NATO's eastern flank allies, about a range of issues, including security, of course, in the region, including our efforts to address the global health crisis, climate change, energy security. This group was gathering, or they had a preset gathering, and they invited him to address the gathering, and that's exactly what he did.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
On infrastructure, the president spent the last 10 days making very clear his view on the merits of the corporate tax increase, and the White House has rejected user fees as paid-fors. Bless you, Chris. The Republicans have made clear that the 2017 tax law is a non-starter and are proposing user fees to pay for it. I don't understand what the deal space is here when their pay-fors are considered non-starters by you guys and your pay-fors are considered non-starters by theirs.
Well, this is a big week ahead, Phil. So big week for someone who covered Capitol Hill and is now covering the White House. Look, I think the president's red lines are inaction and are anything that would raise taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year. Those are not areas where he is going to move. He is quite open, as is evidenced by the fact that he invited Senator Capito and a group of members to meet with him in the White House later this week. He's very open to having a discussion about where we can find agreement, where we can move forward. And he has been encouraged by the spirit in which Senator Capito and other Republican colleagues are engaging with him. And he's hopeful that the meeting will be constructive. Now, you're right, and what you touched on, which is an interesting piece of this, is that the disagreement is really about the pay-fors. There is agreement about the need to modernize our infrastructure, about the need to do more to create jobs in the economy. And he's looking forward to hearing what additional ideas they may have.
One more quick one. I understand where you guys and the Fed are, that inflation right now is transitory if it pops to the degree that it does. The jobs report kind of was a reminder that we don't necessarily have a roadmap for coming out of a once-in-a-century pandemic economically. Are you guys concerned about what would happen if you're wrong and it's not transitory and this ends up being an actual real problem in the weeks or months ahead when it comes to inflation?
Well, let me first say that our economic team watches this incredibly closely, including our Secretary of Treasury, who has an expansive background in watching inflation. And so we have confidence in both their assessments to date and also the fact that they will watch this as we continue to assess the state of our economy. I will say that, and the president will talk about this shortly, I should say, later this afternoon.
And he'll take
that
one
his
question.
view is that we need to. We've always believed that there would be ups and downs in our jobs reports. That is historically how it has gone. That there are a number of factors that contribute to it being a challenge for people to hire and people to rejoin the workforce. And there are steps we can take, and this is what he will talk about in his remarks.
Why would you work?
As a government, we've obviously taken a number of those steps, including passing the American Rescue Plan. But there are a number of barriers to work. The biggest barriers we've seen: affordability of childcare, schools reopening, vaccinations is actually a huge factor. So when you dig into this data, which obviously we've done over the last couple of days, one interesting thing that struck the president as interesting is that the week of April 12th, which is the week that the data was compiled for the April jobs report, was collected, At that point, only 18% of 18 to 64-year-olds were fully vaccinated. And as of May 9th, it's risen to 34%. And the 7-day moving average of positive COVID cases was 40% higher in mid-April than May 8th last week when the data was compiled for next month. So all I'm conveying is there are a range of factors. He'll talk about announcements on state and local funding, how that will be distributed, which will help keep police, firefighters, and others on the job. He'll talk about delivering assistance to restaurants,
What
which
about
is
the funding?
where we see major opportunity for employment or rehiring. He'll talk about providing guidance to childcare centers, which will help ensure that that funding gets out the door to cover child costs. He'll talk about the employee retention tax credit, which will hopefully help small and medium-sized businesses. But he also believes that there are steps businesses need to take, which he'll also talk about. Employers can get people vaccinated. They can pay people a decent wage. These larger companies have received $1.4 trillion in money. They can do a better job of paying a decent wage to bring people back into the workforce. And so,
There's
there's a
talking
lot of
point.
steps different entities can
Pay
take, and that's
people more
where
and
he
they'll
thinks,
finally go back to work.
discuss this
Shit.
afternoon and where he thinks the focus should be. Go ahead.
Thank you. Two topics really quick. First on ethics waivers. The White House apparently had ethics restrictions that were preventing officials who work here from communicating with the unions they worked at previously, and they waived them for somebody at OMB and somebody at the Made in America office. And I'm curious why that happened.
Well, first, since you gave me the opportunity, I will reiterate that this administration the president signed an executive order requiring all appointees across the federal government to sign the most stringent ethics code ever adopted by any White House. So as you referred to, in the narrowest circumstances when necessary and in the public's interest, the order authorizes agencies to grant limited waivers in consultation with White House counsel's office, including in the cases you're citing. President, of course, has stood strong for unions throughout his career, and he's proud to have leading labor
We get it.
voices
You
in
guys
the
like
White
unions.
House. And there are circumstances, very, very limited, where it is in the interests of governing, in the interest of getting work done for the American people, to issue these waivers.
And then on the economy, so employment only rose by about 266,000 jobs in April out of 7.4 million or so job openings. How does the White House know that people are just choosing not to apply for jobs because the extra unemployment benefits are so good?
Well, first, let me say that we have looked at the data, and Secretary Yellen referred to this on Friday, or talked about this on Friday. We don't see much evidence that the extra unemployment insurance
Oh
is a major
gosh.
driver in
Much
people
evidence?
not rejoining
I love
the
that wording.
workforce. We actually see the data, and our analysis shows that lack of vaccination, the lower rate, which is why I referred to the data and the week that it was taken, it has an impact. Child care has an impact. Schools reopening has an impact.
Yes,
but there is
schools
also the
reopening
need
does have an
to
impact.
pay
Open
a
'em up.
livable working wage. And that's one of the reasons the president will talk
Everywhere.
about that this afternoon.
But as Bank of America economists who are cited in a Bloomberg story say, anybody making less than $32,000 a year is better off financially just taking the unemployment benefit. So is the White House creating an incentive just to stay home?
Yes, they
Well,
are.
again, the majority of economists, internally and externally of the White House, don't feel that unemployment insurance, something that was done at a time where to help unemployed people get through a very difficult economic downturn during a pandemic, is a major driver in our unemployment data. That
Well,
there
those people
are
are
other
idiots.
factors, bigger factors, that have been contributing to the numbers we saw on Friday. That's
that's a
what we're
talking
working
point.
to address, and that's where we think our solution should be focused.
Just last one really quick. The Commerce Secretary says the main reason that people are staying home is fear. How does the White House know that people are scared? What is that based on?
Well, I think what she was referring to is
It is a
the
margin
fact
call.
that there was a much lower vaccination
idiot.
rate just a month
If
ago.
you're working and
and
making
that
$30,000
people
just to
are
have-
fearful
you can make
about
more
getting
money on
sick.
unemployment.
They are fearful about whether they're going to have the conditions to be healthy, whether they can send their kids to a child care center, whether there is a child care center. So those are all factors that are consistent with
Stay home and
the examples
trade
and
Doge.
reasons I just provided. Go ahead, Josh.
You mentioned if you're monitoring inflation and that with the jobs report you expected sort of, lumpy reports from month to month. Do you expect the same thing with the inflation report? Is the White House bracing for kind of an eye-popping top-line number given the base effects it will be going off of, or are you not sort of cautioning that? Are you worried people
He's
will
so scared
overreact
about
to
asking a
one
question.
member?
Just ask the question. Say
Well,
with Jess.
obviously, our analysis is going to be done by our economic experts. They continue to convey that
And
they believe
apparently
the
they're
impact
really
will be
good.
temporary, transitory, however you want to refer to it. But they're looking at it closely. But I don't have any projections on that to make from here today.
Can I ask a little bit more about vaccinations? The average has dropped from about 3.4 million 4 weeks
Yep.
ago a day to about 2 million. It looks like it's sort of leveled off there, that's declining steadily. Is that where you expect it to continue? Do you expect it to keep coming down?
Yes.
And what are the factors that you think are driving that? It's a pretty substantial drop over the past
People don't want to
month or
get
so.
it.
Sure. Well, we always expected we'd be in a different phase. And we were at a phase just several weeks ago, and you cover this
People
closely,
are
so you know well,
looking at the
where
facts.
there was such a demand for the vaccine. People were eager to get their appointment. They were had vaccine T-shirts. They were doing selfies. We are now at the point which we always knew we would be at, where the supply has increased, has exceeded the demand,
doesn't
and it
know.
means we have to work extra hard to get into communities, to have partnerships with local doctors, with
doesn't
primary care
understand when
physicians
the
to expand
supply is
access,
more than demand. She
expand
doesn't
mobile
understand
units that are
why
going
that's
to
the
communities
case.
to get the supply out to people. We have reached hit a higher number than I think most people
Supply and demand.
anticipated
The
at this
reason
point.
there's more supply than demand is
since
'cause
the president
people
was
aren't
inaugurated,
getting
the
the
number of people who have been
vaccine,
vaccinated, who have received their
not
first dose and are
because
hopefully on their
they're
way to their
scared.
second dose. So
Blah,
we knew
blah,
we would be in
blah.
this phase, and we knew we'd be in a phase where it'd be more
like the dumbest thing.
difficult because we need to increase access, which we've been focused on doing from the beginning, and continue
It's
to
not
increase
access.
confidence.
People
We've
aren't-
seen
people
progress
don't
in
want
both
it.
areas.
2 weeks ago, the 10 million doses of AstraZeneca that were being reviewed
Yeah.
by the FDA. Do you have an update on that at all? Are
He's
they
so
still
scared to
reviewing it?
ask
They are
questions.
still reviewing it. We don't
don't
have
wanna
an
hurt your
update quite
feelings
yet,
right now, Jen.
and we're working
I wanna be
to
invited to
hopefully
your
have more for
parties.
you on what our how our approach and what our assessment will be of how those doses will be distributed.
Quick housekeeping, tomorrow's meeting, governor, is that virtual or are they all coming?
Virtual.
Virtual meeting.
Yeah.
Can you give us finally
Yeah.
a sense of whether you're considering easing travel restrictions, particularly to Europe or whatever for
Mm-hmm.
vaccinated people? Where's the U.S. thinking on that?
I don't have anything to preview on that at this point in time. Go ahead, David.
Back to this interesting question on the unemployment benefits. One suggestion the Republicans have been making is end those benefits earlier than the current plan, which I think is the end of September,
Yes.
and use that money to go into infrastructure. Is that being taken up by your side?
I'm certain they will bring many ideas to the meetings later
AKA
this week. That may be
no.
one of them.
Yeah, right.
But again, I think it's important to note that
Republicans said
we
this?
don't see
We'll never do it.
the unemployment benefits as a major driver in the jobs numbers. We see
Sure.
there being a number of other factors that have a larger impact,
this black Sharpie
including
pen
the
is
pace
actually
of
orange,
vaccination just
even
a
though it
month
looks
ago.
black.
The
It writes
child
in
care
black.
impacts, the need to get
just
more
can't
money
figure
out
out
into
why
state
it's
and
not
local
orange.
communities. So that's where our focus is going to be. And for us, it's important that we continue to remain solutions oriented on areas where we feel can be most beneficial to the economy and not be
Right.
moved by talking points.
Exactly. Let's just keep printing money. Good point.
Thanks, Jen. The White House sent out earlier that the president's meeting later today with Senator Harper and Senator Manchin. I was wondering if you could just give us a preview of what they plan to discuss and why those two senators in particular were invited, or will it be virtual? I don't know.
Sure. Well, I would expect the president will have, you already know, he has a number of meetings scheduled this week, one with bipartisan bicameral leadership meeting on Wednesday. He also has the meeting with Senator Capito and a group of Republican senators on Thursday. So these are just examples of two senators, additional members he'll be meeting with to discuss the American Jobs Plan, discuss the path forward, and I'm not sure we'll have a big readout afterwards, but it's just a part of his ongoing outreach.
And given, just quickly, you said, you know, what a big week it is. He has so many meetings with so many lawmakers. Is this sort of, I guess, like a defining week, would you say, for how things are going to proceed on the jobs plan, the families plan? Is the White House sort of, you know, setting any kind of deadline? You've mentioned Memorial Day as a time to see progress. I'm curious, you know, where you kind of go after this week, given all the meetings that are
Looks like he's
scheduled.
16
The
and a
president
big,
would
he's got
still
a big
like
boy
to see
suit.
progress by Memorial Day and would like to sign the bills into law this summer. That hasn't changed, but we don't have a new deadline. But of course, a number of meetings, and the Senate's back, and there'll be all sorts of conversations happening this week. Sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
Do you get a sense that as the president's going to have his first meeting with Kevin McCarthy here in that leadership meeting you talked about, Obviously, the House Republicans have some of their own internal matters going on. Does the president think any discord they are having has an influence or comes into the meetings that he will have, how he views sitting down with them at all?
No, the president knows that there is some introspection going on in the Republican Party right now, and a determination about who they're going to be, who they want to lead them, and what they want to represent moving forward. He's
Just
not
like the
going to focus
Democrats.
on that. He also believes that the American
acting like
people
it's only a Republican
did not
issue.
elect him to accept improbability or impossibility of working in a bipartisan manner. So the role he can
Oh, yeah,
play
Biden's
as
very
president of the United
bipartisan.
States is to continue to seek ways to work together. And the fact is, we are continuing to work, even with the family excitement that's happening on the other side of the aisle. We are continuing to work with Republicans on a range of issues. National security. We passed our we confirmed
Use your
our
words.
cabinet
trouble here.
in a faster pace since Reagan. We're
okay.
working to increase our competition. There are a lot of ways we're working with Republicans, even as they're determining who they are moving forward. Go ahead in the back.
Thank you, Jen. Both German Chancellor Merkel and French President Macron have expressed their concerns over U.S. policy towards vaccine. They've basically been underlying the need for more exports, be it for the vaccine itself or the components. Does the President understand their frustration? And more broadly, do you think he underestimated the negative reactions around the world?
Well, let me first say that the president's commitment to a global COVID-19 response has been steadfast and consistent since day one, when we made the decision to
Exactly.
rejoin
Remember when
the
Kamala
WHO.
said, "I won't take the
We
vaccine if
understand
Trump
that
makes it"?
the
Remember
border,
that?
the virus
Very
knows no borders.
consistent.
That it is important for the United States to continue to
It's the
play
definition of
a central
consistency.
role in addressing the global pandemic. We've invested more than any other country in COVAX, and we're pushing other countries to invest more in the program to get vaccines to developing countries. We're working to boost global production through partnerships like the Quad Partnership. Moderna and Pfizer have announced plans and intentions to increase supply and get it out to the global community. And of course, we've announced that we are going to share 60 million doses, 10 million of which, as Josh referred to or alluded to earlier, will be hopefully approved by the FDA soon. So there's no question we're playing a role. We will continue to play an increased role in efforts to address the pandemic and get the pandemic under control.
Yeah, what's going on with my internet?
Go ahead in the back.
Hey,
Thank you,
beep.
John.
Beep,
Speaking
beep. Is
of,
my internet all
NATO's
janky?
eastern flank, the important part of security system in the Central and Eastern Europe was supposed to be U.S. missile defense site in Poland. The project stalled
Does
during
my internet
the
look bad?
previous administration. It
It's like
has been delayed twice.
Not doing well.
Is President Biden committed to completing the project?
I don't have anything to preview about a bilateral project or project in Poland at this point in time. The president addressed this group today. He provided remarks. It's obviously a group of 9 countries, so it was not focused on one particular country, even though I know the president of Poland was a co-host of the event. I can certainly follow up with our national security team and see if there's more to report. Go ahead.
We're seeing hesitancy in some areas to resume activities that even the CDC says are safe. You know, not wearing a mask outside if you're fully vaccinated, or even in particular in-person schooling. Does the administration have a strategy on helping cure those anxieties around the country and make sure that the reopening can go as smoothly as possible?
The reopening of schools. Well, we actually saw data that came out just last week that showed more than 50% of schools are open 5 days a week, and that data is from March. So we're actually seeing increasing numbers as
All right,
schools
my internet is dropping.
receive the American Rescue Plan
I don't know
funding,
what's going
and
on.
as
I'm
they
gonna
apply
stop
the
this.
mitigation
Appreciate you guys
measures.
tuning in. I'm gonna go
so I'm
fix
not
my
sure,
internet.
but
I
was
don't
there
understand why
specific
it's
data
doing
you were
this.
referring to, or?
Just the reopening schools, but getting families confident that sending their children to those schools
Sure.
is safe.
Sure.
Yeah, it's growing and getting worse.
This is
I don't know what's going
certainly
on.
as we
Thank
look
you guys so much for
to,
tuning in. Have a fantastic day. Keep
wait
watching
for
this.
and
Let me
hope
know what
for,
your
of
thoughts are.
course,
Make sure to
approval
subscribe.